Trey, welcome to Seismic Radio. It's a pleasure to have you on and to talk a little bit about what's been happening with you recently. Trey, let's make a start. You've done a bunch of videos in the past. Noah, we've got a few other videos as well. How's it going? What's been happening so far?
Well, there are a couple of things that I wanted to go over with you, and one of them has to do with Enoch, and this is a very controversial text.
We had a go ahead.
Well, there are a lot of Christians, a lot of people in general believe that this book is nothing. It's to be discarded. It's
Let me sort of interject. I mean, one of the things which I found, we've done some stuff on Enoch a few years ago, and one of the things which I found quite interesting was that the response to Enoch is quite huge. There seems to be a huge amount of interest in the book and what the book is saying. And also, it's like you say, what I found as well is that a lot of people, they are very adamant, this is just a wrong book, it's not part of the Bible, it's not part of the canon, we should really, leave it alone and just don't do anything with it. Why do you think this is so emotive? Why is there such an either-or scenario that some people are really, really hot on it, possibly hotter than what they should be, and others are really, really cold on it? So what do you think?
Well, the Book of Enoch, and I want to go through this more extensively in another video. But number one, the first thing to bear in mind about this Book of Enoch is that it's not to be held to Scripture, and I would never suggest anyone do that. But that does not mean that the Book of Enoch isn't real. And this book, why this is even a topic of discussion is because when you're dealing with Nephilim, these strange creatures that appear, this passage that almost zips by you too quick in Genesis 6, where you're reading about and the sons of God came into the daughters of men and begat giants or gigantes or Nephilim by them, and that these were there before and after the flood. So that's what the text is directly telling you. Well, here you have this book that sort of opens up and expands on this, and it does it with such clarity. And that's another topic about Enoch, is that when you're looking at pseudepigrapha texts or texts that are basically just made up but ascribed to an author, which is what is alleged about the Book of Enoch. When you're dealing with texts like that, they are loosey-goosey and all over the place. Enoch does not read like those texts. Let me give you a basic example. If you have a pseudepigrapha text, like, for example, the books of the lost books of the Garden of Eden, you start reading these, and immediately you know that you're reading some piece of fanciful writing. Or if you're reading, for example, the books of the infancy of Jesus, when you're reading these texts, you've got one part where Jesus is in a classroom and he gets upset at the instructor, the rabbi, and he turns the other children into monkeys. I mean, you have this kind of ridiculous tone that just bleeds through so abundantly. Tossing Enoch in that pile, I think, is presumptuous. But on the other hand, end of the fence, it being real or largely real, and I'll get to what that means in a moment. It being real does not hold it to the level of Scripture, nor would I encourage anyone, to hold it to the level of Scripture. But I do think it's genuine. Let me quickly, before I forget, go through the 2 points that jumps out at most Christians. Now, number one, the first point is you get into this text, and there's a statement by Enoch about the size of the giants. So it'll say on there that this is 300 cubits, which will work out to something like 450 feet. This is roughly saying that one of these giants, or one of these creatures, was about the size of Noah's Ark. So Noah's Ark could, in a sense, be, you could have used Noah's Ark as a floating coffin for one of these giants, if that measurement is accurate. And I'll notate there are some out there that make the interesting point that you're dealing with a different environment. Certainly, we pull bones of large lizards and dragons out of the earth that are so large in scale that it requires a whole different ecological system. And certainly the Greeks with their Kraken creature and their Titan stories, which are individuals that are both part God and part man, they certainly depicted in their mythologies, which largely based on Egyptian stuff, but they depicted, creatures that, would have been as tall as the Statue of Liberty. And Hollywood certainly has no problem with it. Nonetheless, with that particular point, the statement there, I would agree with at least most of the scholars that I've listened to have examined that text pretty thoroughly, that what you're looking at is, simply a distortion. The text should actually read 30 cubits. And this puts you in the ballpark of, a large one being something like 36 feet. That doesn't make me right, and it doesn't make those guys right. Maybe there were Kraken-looking creatures like on the Clash of the Titans movie. Maybe there were a couple of these running loose. I don't know. But what I have a feeling is the case with that particular portion of the text is that you're looking at what is pretty well established as a distortion of the text. That you're looking at something that gets up to a maximum of about 36 feet. Now, the second thing on Enoch that they run to real quick is the section of text where it talks about angels helping build Noah's Ark. And I would agree with them. This is a real big problem if that statement is in there. But you have to look at that segment of text. That entire segment of text which contains this statement about angels building the boat is not only out of place in this portion of Enoch, it's so out of place that suddenly you're hit with building the ark, which Enoch wasn't even present for. And on top of this is inserted into a segment of text that's talking about way earlier when these fallen angels came in. And the segment of text which contains this is a well-known pseudepigrapha text. And it states so at the very beginning on that segment. It actually states an insert from the Book of Noah. Okay. So these were, this is, and you have several parts within Enoch where these inserts are, and on that specific one, it specifically labels it. I would argue that what you're holding there, though, I would totally and wholeheartedly agree, has not been handled with care, if you will. Certainly not the care of other biblical texts. But to carte blanche blanket state that you're not holding something that in some areas of it physically has made me shiver in reading the text is a stretch. There are only 3 books that read like that one does, to me, from my view. So you've got a pre-flood book that talks about the end. You've got an Old Testament book that largely focuses on the end, and that would be Daniel, right? And in both of these 2 books are the only places prior to Jesus where I find this term, this unusual term, the Son of Man, used, the coming of this Son of Man. And then, of course, your last one that has this same sort of tone to it. Clearly all different authors, but this same sort of friend of God tone of apocalyptic events towards the end would be John in the New Testament. So from three of your writers, pre-flood, Old Testament, and the New Testament, you've got these writings which are largely focused on the end, and that's how Enoch begins. By the way, this book that covers these Nephilim creatures.
A couple of points I want to make. I mean, I think one of a big point is that possibly the Book of Enoch has never been as relevant as it may be in our generation. I think that's maybe a thing which is safe to say, especially with regards to Matthew 24 and all the events which have been happening, which are sort of unfolding in front of our eyes. Maybe for those of our listeners who are not quite aware of what we're talking about, there's some really weird or strange statement in Genesis 6, that a lot of this is based around. that the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they came in, they procreated with them, and the heroes of old. And that's really all it says in there, in Genesis 6. And there have been sort of a lot of ideas about it. One idea is that it was actually angelic beings, and this is substantiated with the Book of Enoch. Angelic beings came in, they procreated with the daughters of men, and they created some hybrids, some giants. I think that there's another thing as well. Is one thing which I had to think of about the Book of Enoch is the evidence which we find, or which we have found, I think, for about 100 years, about giant human skeletons or parts of giant human skeletons found all over the world. Yeah? And there seems to be a lot of evidence. Obviously, with Photoshop and all that, there are a lot of fakes going around. But I think when you look at some newspapers which were edited 100 years ago, and you find copies of them, and they've got pictures of huge, ginormous human skeletons, which suddenly just mysteriously disappear because they don't fit in within, the ideas of evolution and other things which are pushed by the establishment. So they suddenly just disappear, nobody sees them, but we've got some evidence of, journalists who have taken photos, went into a newspaper, was a story, lasted for a short time, and then they disappeared. And I think that's an interesting point as well, because when you look at these facts, and then you look at the Book of Enoch, you can tie one and one together, and you can see, yes, there may be more, or there may be more to it than, what seems to be there on the surface, and that it's actually telling the truth. And I think there's another point which I think which we need to talk about, and that is something happened in the days of Noah, and that was that two dimensions were merging. There was the dimension where man sort of runs around, and there's the angelic dimension as well. And angels or fallen creatures from the other dimensions started hanging around with humans. And I think when we look at some of the stuff which is sort of coming up in the media, and what people tend to believe more and more is the whole alien issue as well. And so maybe can we draw a conclusion that Nephilim might be potentially equal to alien? I don't know. Yeah.
Well, okay. When we're looking at these texts from Genesis 6, and a lot of people write this up as this is the only passage that talks about these Nephilim, and that's just not the case at all. The Old Testament is littered with this. And you got two different things going on in the Old Testament of the Bible. One of the largest portions of what's going on in the Old Testament is these prophetic books. So these are books of prophecy coming from different ages, which are predicting with full accuracy, no less, coming world events. Okay, so and many of these leading to both the first and second coming of Jesus Christ. So, and it's those prophetic pages that often convert atheists. When I talk to the Bible and what it's saying, because it's telling you about that there's no other book, there's no occult book, there's no pagan book, and I've looked hard. That there is no. I mean, you got to pick through miles of Nostradamus stuff to find even something that you can shift, rattle, and shake to try and jam a square peg into a round hole to make it look like a prediction of some type. The occult stuff is loosey-goosey with an occasional little thing in there that once in a while the demon has got to give you something, right? But there is nothing that comes close to those prophetic pages in the Old Testament. Now, that encompasses about 70% of what you're looking at in those pages. The other pages are dealing with the history of a people, okay? That beginning with Abraham. So, beginning with Abraham, right? You've got this lineage of people that are going to lead to the coming Messiah. So this is the delivery mechanism for the Savior of mankind, which if you're reading it and you go through detail by detail what actually leads to Jesus Christ, you're going to find, and it's a tedious study, but one well worth doing, that what you're going to see in those pages is that all the little dots that have to connect to get to Jesus are fulfilling all of the rules, and this is no short list of rules, all the list of rules set forth, right, for the Messiah. So, and coming through the lineage of kings. In fact, David, the one called the man after God's own heart. In fact, David's Psalms, the songs that he was out there singing, that he wrote down, those songs are authentically from the Holy Spirit, because they are nothing short of prophecy as well. They're not just pretty words for paper. What these are is these are prophecies of the coming king. But to the issue of Nephilim, when you're looking at those historical pages and this promised land, so here's Abraham being promised by God Himself, being this is the promised land. After the Hebrews were in captivity, after they were slaves in Egypt, when they came into that very land that God led their forefather to, the land of promise, when they arrived in that land, it was littered with things. This place was a literal minefield of all sorts of monstrosities, according to the text. Things like the Amalekites, the Hebrews themselves. This is a word that could mean, people of the bloodsuckers. The vampire-like demon is one translation of it. I mean, this is not a generous or friendly term for this group of people. But you've also, what jumps out at you is you've got giants in the land.
The so-called Rephaim and Anakim, I think, translated means giants.
Well, and this is where, so in the New Agers use this word, the Anunnaki. This word gets tossed around a lot, and it comes from the Zecharia Sitchin stuff, which I don't. I really. It makes my heart sink a little every time I hear his name or somebody quoting him on a documentary, or the Ancient Aliens people used a whole lot of his stuff, and very trustingly believed these Sumerian translations that he provided, which were so riddled with just what they were as his own imagination. In the 70s, even in the 80s, of course, you didn't have the internet, and these Sumerian translations weren't right at your fingertips where you can go on and read them yourself. But you can actually do word searches through these texts. And what you're going to find is that most every single point that he put forth, especially all of his major ones, like, for example, he said that aliens or the Anunnaki came and created man. There's not even anything remotely similar to this in the text. He talked largely about this planet Nibiru. He talked about the aliens were coming to mine gold off of. This stuff isn't even hinted at in the text. I had guys doing a documentary about Zecharia Sitchin that was with some David Icke stuff. They wanted me to be in a video, in a documentary thing with them. I couldn't schedule it, but I remember the guy called me later. I was putting together Noah at the time that he was talking to me, and he says to me, and I would talk to him about Jesus each time and tell him, this is what I believe and this is the way it looks to me, and I would actually talk to this guy who was putting together a very hardcore, New Age documentary, and it probably was the Lord that I wasn't in it, but. In retrospect, but he would call me and I would converse with him at night, and in the evening when I got done, and he was in Europe where you're at, and he told me one time, he says, the more that I've put this thing together, the more that I've come to realize that the basis of what we're presenting here isn't true. He says, can you find anywhere where there were aliens mining for gold? And I said no, and I've looked at those texts pretty heavily, particularly in doing Noah. I mean, the Sumerian texts talk about a lot of strange things. There's no argument there. They talk about a lot of very hardcore occultic things. They talk about people summoning. What's happening is we're summoning in beings or gods, and these gods do indeed in those texts. They are interested in birthing their own children, their offspring. There's no argument. You're going to see that covered in full color hieroglyphs in Egypt. You're going to see that in full display right there at the inception of all of the coming little empires of earth, most particularly Babylon. Right out there in ancient Eridu, Sumer, Akkad, the birthplace of all of our current civilizations. You're going to find them doing hardcore summonings. They're desperate to get the demons to come in, to get the devils, and the bigger the devil, the better. And that's the interest from the demonic side. Is it wants to birth its way. It wants to sexually breed its way. I don't know how to put it any other friendly way. It wants an end, right? And so you commented earlier on this alien stuff. You've got things collecting eggs and semen. I've got rocks in this next video, entities, the Ica stones, same stones that contain a bunch of dinosaurs, same stones that possess a bunch of occult practices, psychic surgeries, you name it, it's on those stones. Same stones that have been verified through patina and biofilm that's on the stone. Anyhow, I'm not going to argue their authenticity, but those stones do contain pictures of them collecting semen in jars. They give it to the very things that they're summoning. So, and this is in the same areas where you're finding massive temples where, they think to appease their friendly gods that you've got to rip someone else's heart out. I believe there's a problem with that picture. And that picture is night and day different than what it tells me in the gospel. And so is the Muslim stuff. The Muslims don't even understand their practices. They don't even they don't. I was trying to tell a Muslim man this the other day, and they are very diligent people. I mean, they're just on their knees to pray, and they just want to pray, and they're very diligent. They're more diligent than any Christian that I know. They're so diligent they'll cut their heads off, but they'll cut your head off because the text tells them to.
Yeah, exactly.
But what I'm saying is that in the pages of the Bible that I'm reading, what it says is it says that they'll kill you, and they think that they do God a service, and here these people are, and they're willing to do these things. But in Genesis, in the pages, well, not of Genesis, but getting into Exodus, getting into Joshua, what you're reading is that there were not only giants in the land, that there were not only other things that were there that apparently are strange. But there were certainly giants, and you got records of this from all across the globe. You've got bones for them. I don't know what more is needed.
What's happening to the bones? I mean, that's another thing. One thing, you do seem to get evidence. You get a lot of statements of people having found these bones, but what's happening to them? This is one of the things. Maybe you can comment on a little bit on that, because it's like a lot of other things which do not fit in with sort of the scientific community. They just seem to bury it, and they find them, and it seems like they throw them back where they found them and put a lot of dirt over them to make sure nobody else sees them.
Well, and a lot of this is more organic than people realize. People are looking for there to be conspiracy out there, and there is. There is. But the conspiracy is more of a demonic scope. And there's a misunderstanding of how a museum works. A museum has got maybe a few dinosaur bones, some glowing rocks, maybe a universe exhibit, and that's what it's got. Maybe they've got a mummy in there, okay? So it's basically got the junk that nobody else wanted. Your real hardcore, here it is type artifacts are going to end up in private collections. That means they end up on the palaces of our earth. Yeah, a person would be insane to believe that you're out there dealing Saudi Arabian prince, right? A lot of these artifacts are out there in places like Egypt. They're out there in places like Saudi Arabia. They're out there in places like Iran, Iraq, where that's ancient Persia when you're dealing with Iran, and this is ancient Babylon when you're dealing with Iraq. A person would be very naive, at bare minimum, I'm putting it kindly, to believe that these people in their palaces are not going to collect up the good stuff and give the trinkets and the junk to the general populace to go look at and pitch whatever story they want to be true, which is an interesting point, because the governments, as far as I can tell, I mean, particularly like in this new video, entities, I mean, the Russian government, they were very interested in Egypt. There's some stuff that they found in Egypt that I'll save for that video, but they were getting bodies out of there. I'm telling you that they were getting at least one really strange one, which looks similar to me to the stuff that Brian Forrester, is finding all over the place out there in Peru, which is all over the world as well. It's elongated skulls. You find them in Egypt. You find them in other places. So, I mean, this is a global thing. Mm-hmm. And there's reason to believe from their genetics, what limited genetics studies have been done on the matter at this point, the type of things, these weird-looking things, if they're genuine, if you're really looking at one of the genuine ones and not one of the artificial, head-binding things, which are easy to tell the difference between. But these genuine monsters, it absolutely couldn't interbreed with a human. They would have had difficulty doing such. Mm-hmm. And this is going to reduce their numbers quite quickly. And if we're assuming that the genetics of mankind was better and stronger in the past, and we're weakening over time, which is what the DNA states, by the way, then your odds of being able to breed something like this, the further back that you are in time and the stronger that your genetics are, the more of a possibility this is, and the more that possibility dwindles out of existence. And if the thing can't breed, then even without armies against it, if the thing can't breed, then the show's over. Okay? So, and also, if you're breeding giants in the way that the ecological systems are today, the way that the atmosphere is today, it's going to have much more trouble supporting that really big guy. And he's going to be really big and fumbly. And the smaller guy has, by sheer virtue of these facts alone, got some basic advantages just from the start against you. And that would not have been the case in the ancient world. You're pulling bones out of the ground of stuff that couldn't live at all in today's environment. You could have a giant today, but a 36-footer, for example, like what I think Enoch is referencing, I don't, just like an enormous dinosaur, just like a brachiosaurus, it couldn't live. The atmosphere, and the atmosphere alone won't support it. It's just that simple. So, and that's what you're finding in the ground, in your fossil record. You're finding all sorts of stuff that couldn't live today. And the things were larger in scope, more lush, more plentiful. And it's been diminishing. The evidence for the Nephilim, the evidence for there being strange Lord of the Rings style things happening on this planet is indeed significant. And there are those who speculate, some are friends of mine. Of course, everyone, we all have differences of opinion on elements of things where we largely agree on other things, but there's speculations put forth that the genetics for these Nephilim things, these abominations, made it onto the boat through possibly one of the wives. I don't like this at all, because even the idea of it is really has always struck me in a wrong way, because this is like stating that God let one slip through.
Yeah. So Aronofsky was right after all, that one of them almost got through. Aronofsky, I mean, the Noah filmmaker who came up with this really weird and strange story, which obviously is very, very far out. But what do you think? What happened? What happened with the Rephaim and Anakim in the Old Testament, with the giants which were in the land of Israel? I mean, the idea is, that the devil knew that the the land of Israel is going to be the land where the Messiah is going to come forth. And so what he tried to do it is hijack the land with mighty people who hopefully would not give it over to the Israelites when they return from Egypt. I think that's partly the idea which is behind it, but then obviously once God is in the equation, it doesn't really make a difference whether they're big people or small people, or they are mighty people or they are less mighty people. Ultimately, 1 plus God is outnumbering anything. What do you think? What happened? Do you think? I mean, one thing I'm trying to sort of aim at, and I don't know whether you agree with this, is the whole idea that you've got the two dimensions. You've got the evil kingdom. You've got the prince of the world. You've got angels materializing. Maybe you get from the other side, from the bad side, fallen angels as well materializing, and again trying to corrupt the gene pool of mankind and creating creatures which were not quite human. An idea was made, the Israelites, when they came into the land of Israel, they were, into the promised land, they were charged to kill all of them, which sounds very cruel by all standards, women, children, everything. But if there was a genetic pollution of some type or another, it makes sense to, wipe them all out to make sure that this pollution cannot carry on into the people of Israel, into the line of the Messiah, and into mankind as a whole. What do you think?
The objectives there are twofold. When you're talking about the Nephilim creatures, number one, you're talking about something that the bottom line, it would like a body. It would like to make entrance this place. So, according to that Book of Enoch, what it's telling you is that the demons, which would be worshipped by mankind later, and the book is telling you this. So, when these giants, if you will, all of these different types of abominations that may have existed, whatever the imagination can come up with, it's whatever it was, when the waters of that flood washed through and took these things to where they belong. This is their final. So wicked mankind is washed away, and also these abomination things.
Unfortunately, we got caught out by an internet outage during the interview. We will get back in a second. You're listening to Seismic Radio. You can get hold of us at www.seismicradio.org, or you can visit Trey's website at godinanutshell.com. I repeat, it's www.godinanutshell.com. Please bear with us as we return to the talk after we got over the internet outage. Trey, how does it work? I mean, I can see from Genesis 6 that the Nephilim, the giants, came and created all this mayhem. And but what after the flood? I mean, what happened after the flood? How can it be that after the flood we've got all these guys in the land of Canaan at the time, or the land of Israel later, in the Promised Land? How do all these Anakim, Rephaim, all these giants end up there again? And obviously we've got the stories of Goliath as well, who I'm sure wasn't just a guy who was a bit taller than the rest, but must have been quite something. Trey, what do you think?
Well, they certainly didn't hitch a ride on the boat. In fact, specifically, nor did their genetics hitch a ride on the boat through one of the wives.
Okay.
In fact, what it's telling in the text is that Noah was scrutinizing even of the animals. And in the book of Jasher, which is the book of the upright, this is a book that is referenced in 1 Samuel, I believe. But it is actually suggested reading. It's like a documentary style presentation that goes a little bit from before the flood to about Exodus. in the biblical text, and gives insights on Abram before he became Abraham and these other kind of things. It's like a documentary style history in ancient text. But what this book, as well as the Bible in the pages of Genesis, are stating is that, first of all, those wives were not happenstantially chosen. Every person on that boat, every person, and even the little sets of animals that would end up on that ship to spread out and migrate across the entire planet Earth, which is fascinating to look at. You can actually follow how the animals got to wherever they ended up. But everything that was on that boat was not there happenstantially, and was chosen not by Noah, but by God himself. And it may have appeared to be Noah's choice. And it is Noah, the human, standing there, or his son standing there and letting the animals on, but it was God that brought these things to the doorstep, to funnel in that doorway and survive to the other side. What I'm telling you is, and the reason I extensively went through that is it was exactly 0 Nephilim blood on that boat, or no Nephilims that hitched a ride by jumping on the side, nor were they so tall that they kept their heads above the water and waited for the flood to end. The text is specifically telling you that the abyss, the Abzu, the place where they belong, as well as all of the wickedness that they had taught, was engulfed by the abyss. What it's telling you in Enoch is that the spirits of those giants, so the giants are a product of these fallen angels coming in, right? And to deal with, I hear many Christians, as Jesus did state, he said that the angels in heaven, they neither marry nor are given. That when you die, they are as the angels in heaven, which neither marry or are given in marriage, right? So one would say, well, then how did angels do this? Well, let me answer that question real quick, couched in this, that you're dealing with fallen angels who specifically in Genesis 6, as well as the Book of Enoch, are doing something. So we're not only dealing with a pack of fallen angels, right, who as of yet, though they're already a rebellious set of angels, they have not been taken by God, just as Lucifer, Satan, in your biblical text, he's running loose. And in some of your passages has the carte blanche to even at present today, as is in the book of Job, go before God himself. And Satan reads like an attorney, like a little, I'm trying to follow all of these rules, but in a deceptive formula, right? So that's how he reads. He's the prosecutor. He's you and my and everybody watching on the screens prosecutor coming and saying, look what bad that this person did. I think they should be convicted. That's the whole idea. But that this has been paid for, even though you're guilty, according to the rules. So these angels, what they did was they came in to do something specific. The text is saying they looked upon that the daughters of men were fair. This was something that they couldn't have in the place where they were. And they're already rebellious angels. Enoch is taking that a step forward. And he's saying they made a pact, one with another, to go in and do this heinous sin, or this horrible sin, this wicked sin. Indeed, we will be punished for this greatly. We will all pay the penalty of a great sin. So they bound themselves by mutual imprecations, right? They bound themselves together and decided to go in. And it says in Enoch there were about 200 of them that descended onto Mount, it was in the days of Enoch's father Jared, that 200 of these entities, these angels, these fallen beings, B'nai Elohim, came in on the top of Mount Hermon, right? And of course the Greeks, they've got Mount Olympus where the entities are there, the god Zeus and the like, and the sort, that want to mate with the women. Now, so this is something that they couldn't have. Now, before the flood, what you're reading in the text is that before that flood, these angels decided. We're not asking God's permission. In fact, to the contrary, the angels are stating amongst themselves, we know that we're going to pay a penalty of a great sin. But I think that they understood the implications of exactly what their punishment would be. Because when Enoch went before them, and Enoch was a righteous man, right? He begins his text by saying, I, Enoch, a righteous man, having seen the vision of the Holy One in heavens. What does it state? Enoch went in before this group of these beings. And the message before them, he specifically states that a heavy sentence has gone forth to put you in bonds, in chains, for 70 generations, whatever that means. And that's an interesting statement. But you be put in bonds, and you shall never again enter into the heavens. And it was this sentence. See, they were cast away, right? And in the in the layout that Enoch's got of hell, you've got Tartarus, which is as far beneath hell as the earth is beneath heaven. And also in Enoch, you've got an area of hell that is where those that are ultimately going to be condemned of mankind. Hell is a prison. It's not owned by Satan. Satan's not down there. The New Age presentation, even the Catholic Church's presentation, along with all of the, like Dante's Inferno, Satan is not down there making everyone shovel coal, is what I'm telling you. Hell is a prison. Hell is a prison that was designed for these angels, for the angels that rebelled. That's what it is for. It was never for you or I. That's according to the text. But there are compartments there were at that time. Okay, and Enoch goes through this. That one of these compartments is for the souls, is for those that are going to be condemned on the day of judgment, which would certainly include that set of fallen angels. And this other compartment is paradise, often called in the Old Testament Abraham's bosom. So there is a void, a gap, a separator, an unpassable gulf between the two. So this other area, this paradise, if you will, is the area from which the souls would be taken out. They're awaiting the day of this coming of the Son of Man.
I mean, just to sort of support it with some of the Bible statements. If you look in the book of Luke, Jesus talks about it when you take the story of the rich man and poor Lazarus, where this is presented. You know, you've got the horrible place of torment, and you've got the place where poor Lazarus is sitting in the bosom of Abraham. So Jesus is referring to that place as well, as a place of comfort and a place of torment. That's what you're talking about from the Book of Enoch.
Yes, that it would be yes, and that hell will give forth that which it owes, that which it owes. And so these that were there, they were awaiting. They were according to the text, and yes, that is supported by the Bible. Now these beings that entered. Okay, so you've got these fallen angels that came in, and they obviously took some form that would be conducive to exactly what they wanted to do, which is they wanted to mate with the women. So it took some form conducive to this. The offspring was science that is common.
Okay, Trey, I'm just suffering internet problems here. Just wait a moment. Can you repeat the last thing you said? You're back again. It's unfortunate, but it just happens from time to time.
Okay, the product of that union was not only giants, and that's commonly how it gets interpreted, but it was all sorts of abominations. That's what the text is telling you. In fact, the most precise definition, from my view, of the word Nephilim is creatures made from man. So this would be completely the opposite of things like Zecharia, Sitchin's teachings, of things like New Age teachings, of things like your whole gamut of garden variety, occulty little teachings. There's some kind of beings came in and made, and the texts are telling you the complete opposite of that, that beings came in and made a different kind of thing, an abomination, a hybrid from their union with mankind, mixing their genetics, mixing some kind of angelic, fallen angelic genetic with mankind's genetic to produce a deviation from what God had made at the beginning. That's what the text, including the Sumerian text.
Okay. Let me just make one point. Today there's a lot of talk about hybridization, and creating hybrids. And again, Jesus said, like, when he comes back, it'll be just like in the days of Noah. Initially making the point, everything will just go on as normal, but there's also the connotation that he might be referring to some of the technology, some of the stuff which was happening in Noah's days, which will be happening in our days as well. And hybridization, to use this difficult term, is happening right now, isn't it? It's happening in animals, it's happening in plants with GM products, and I know there are some laboratories, there's some laws have been made in Europe to try and stop experimenting on human embryos, to manipulate the gene structure. And now some countries have opened up, and now Europe is saying, we need to compete with them, it's an economic problem, economic issue. We have to open up our laws to keep those scientists in the country and to keep this technology in the country. It's happening today, isn't it? And it sounds like it, that it was happening in the days of Noah as well. Trey just commented on it, but come back to the point of what's happening with the Rephaim and Anakim in the days when the Israelites came back from Egypt.
Okay, so in the days of Noah, so when it makes this statement right here that I've got on the screen from Matthew 24, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be at the time of the coming of the Son of Man. Now, when you're looking at the days of Noah, you have to remember there are two parts to this. There are two parts. So you've got the time before the flood, and you've got the time after the flood when they were building their tower. Now, the inspiration behind their tower, and real quickly, so before the flood, the angels decided, these fallen angels, these wicked angels, in a bottom line sense, they decide, hey, we're going to go do this. We're not asking anybody's permission, including God, and we're going to take our punishment, which they thought was going to be a slap on the wrist, and it wasn't. So they decide, we're coming in, we're doing this. See, when it uses text in hook wives, that implies force. That implies that that this was, we're just doing it. Okay? Now, after the flood, you don't need genetics on your boat from these Nephilim, because after the flood, what you're reading is two different bloodlines. Okay? One of these bloodlines is coming from, so you've got three sons, but the two I'm going to focus on, Shem. Okay? Shem is actually where you get, so this term, Semitic languages, that actually comes from Shem. Your original language was probably Hebrew. That's some version of Hebrew. So and Hebrew is a combination of phonetic and pictographic. So you've got pictographic languages like Egyptian, Mayan, these kind of things, and then you've got other languages that are the Hebrew is a more precise language because it is a perfect combination of both. One of my favorite things to listen to is songs that are written in Hebrew. And music, by the way, is a conduit of spirit. So you be careful and be mindful of what comes in your ears and through your television in your home. because these screens that we've got are, the devil could have never been given such a gift as he has had with these.
We did get caught out by another internet outage, so please bear with us as we are getting back to the broadcast. You can get hold of us at the following two web addresses. First of all, the web address is www.seismicradio.org. Or alternatively, you can go to Trey at www.godinanutshell.com. Please take some time to check out both websites if you can. And we are returning to the broadcast here at Seismic Radio. Okay, I'm rolling.
Hey, I'm rolling. I'm rolling as two. Nimrod, the builder of the Tower of Babel, and this is the same symbology. This first ziggurat, what I believe is the ziggurat of Eridu. It's out there and it's been shaken to its base. It matches up with texts that are out there, that the tongues were confused, and you've got your tower out there, and this is where the first little civilizations would spread out, and also where your biological madness would come from. And right there, within those texts, within those Sumerian texts, what you're finding is the people literally screaming out. Beginning with this little guy, this little cutesy guy, Nimrod, this first little what would technically be an Assyrian king, right? And which is interesting because you've got 33 titles for the Antichrist in the Old Testament and 13 in the New. Numbers are important, numerics of things from my view. One of those titles is the Assyrian. So, and what was this Assyrian doing? This first guy, this mighty hunter against God, he was building his tower. Now we skip right across from there and go over to Egypt, and we see our symbolism of Horus. Now, who was Horus? Horus is the product of the god king called Osiris in their belief structure, and Isis, who is the goddess according to their structure. So just over in Egypt, just like over in Samaria, you've got your god king, Nimrod, the sun god, right? And you've got your goddess, Semramses or Semiramis. And the offspring of this union is, in Egypt, would be Horus, or the little eye above the tower, right? It's hovering just above, and this tower has been built by men. There are 13 steps on that tower, by the way. So mankind is building the staircase up to the dimensional eye, the Horus, the part God, part man union that has become flesh and is operating within this physical realm. So is that a foreshadowing of what there is in the end? And by the way, when you, and let me comment on this for just a second, when you've got little claimed alien guys that your science crowd or your governments may get all kooky over, you're going to find that all over the map you've got these claimed UFO crashes. You'll find them in Brazil. You'll find several of them in Russia with significant evidence behind them. Of course, here in the United States, you've got the Roswell event that I've heard some people speculate that was just an experimental, military craft that crashed. Of course, the government still holds by the official story that it's a weather balloon. My question would be this: why does whatever it is that occurred at Roswell, why does it have more security surrounding that particular topic than our nuclear facilities does, like Los Alamos?
Okay.
So, bottom line, if you were to only believe one of these alien UFO crash stories, if you were to only believe one of them, like the Roswell one, why can't it be alien? Why can't an alien fly across New Mexico successfully? If you've truly got a master of time, space, and matter, or someone that's managed to come from light years away in another planet, either way, the problem remains, but it can't navigate its spaceship across New Mexico. Now, if you were to believe that these are sprinkled across the map, and that governments have been rushing out with their little black ops teams or whatever to lug away the wreckage of whatever it is, which is coincidentally not that much superior to what we've got now. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to copy it. You wouldn't be able to reverse engineer it. I mean, if it were someone really building something that were of that significance, of that kind of scope, like is suggested, one would think it would be so far beyond us. But that's another argument. But my bottom line question is this. If something that already has a long history of operating through deceptive practices, right? And all of a sudden it's crashing its spaceships for governments or it's crashing its claimed spaceships, it's junk that it's got, for governments to go out there and get all excited and hide and say, look what we've got, hidden in our little shelters. My question is this. Who is it that doth come bearing such gifts? I mean, isn't that one of the first mind games that someone would play? Is you get the enemy or the person you're trying to trick to build whatever it is you want built. Perhaps your 13-step staircase up to the eye peeking through. There's an interesting line where it's talking about building this Tower of Babel under Nimrod, the Assyrian. A reference, perhaps foreshadowing, of your Assyrian Antichrist at the end. It says that in building this tower, the tower whereupon the eye, the dimensional eye of your little underworldy little god is peering in, it says that they were standing there with their bricks and their slime. Wow. My thing is,
is your computer still now?
Wow, isn't that funny? Isn't that just hilarious?
Yeah, it's just an afternoon of... saying that we had a good go for half an hour, but an afternoon of computer crashes.
Let's just go again. Let's keep recording.
Okay.
It says in the text that they were standing there. They had come with their bricks and their slime to build the tower that leads to the dark God who tells nothing but lies. I would say that it sounds to me like here we are again with our bricks and our slime in our hands, thinking that we have secrets of some significant kind, when in fact we got junk from a deceiver. When you look at the Egyptians, let me give you a basic example of this and what was taught by our little cutesies who dotted that land that would become Israel, the promised land, that land that was scattered like a minefield full of abominations. Let me turn this Facebook junk off. That land that was scattered like a minefield full of abominations, which came after the flood because all of their ancient texts from Egypt to Samaria and beyond are redundantly saying that they were crying out for something to come in. You don't need there to be genetics on the boat. You don't need there to be a Nephilim that hitched a ride, because the people were desperate for it. The people that had come from there were two paths, two men on the other side of that flood. You've got Shem, who the blessing was given to. And then you've got Ham, the lineage. And Ham is the father of the Canaanites. The Canaanites, of course, were the giants. And through that lineage is going to be your little Nimrod, your little cutesy world leader that wants his tower. He wants to build his tower, which, by the way, God is in the business of knocking down men's towers. And that applies on a corporate scope as it does to our personal life. God's in the business of removing our idols, if I'm reading the text correctly. what they were calling in was their little cutesy gods. Now you look out there, and let's take Egypt, for example. I hear people, particularly those in the New Age, they'll look at Mayan stuff and they'll look at Egyptian stuff, and they get all loosey-goosey, and pretty soon you've got all the ray of the seven suns is going to come in, and it's going to enlighten us all, or it's all of the messages are going to be, we're going to become as gods, right? Which takes you right back to the Garden of Eden. But within those Egyptian texts, the gods were very, very specific on how to communicate with them. And this is the same thing that I'm finding in the UFO stuff. If you got somebody bearing gifts, if you will, that's crashing little spaceships so that you can go out there and get all excited. Look, man, I got something weird. Maybe we can put this together with this and this. And then let's say you've got multiple of these, like you've got guys in Russia doing the same thing. Oh, we've got something secret as well right here. Look at what we've got. Look at what we're playing with. What I'm asking is a larger question. Who is it that's giving you parts of something that you're building? Are we building ourselves another little tower here to get to our dimensional eye? Are we trying to communicate? Because the instructions back then that the demons were giving looked pretty precise on how to talk back and forth. The only kicker in this is that the benefit of that was never for you. It was never for Nimrod. That thing on the other side, this is a failure to think about basic questions. If you're dealing with something older than you and wiser than you, then what does it need you for? And you don't need one page of a Bible to deduce that. It's just, it's a convenience. It's a gratuity that you've got pages of a text that says, hey, you're dealing with something that not only appears deceptive, not only wants to kill you, but is doing that, and it wishes it. But while you're listening to it and paying attention to it, which, by the way, is the reason you're told not to, because if it can use you for its own means, it will. So I would beg the question, is what you're building, is it really for you? Or is it for something you don't even understand? Because according to the pages of Revelation, that's exactly the case. That the thing that they're helping, the thing they're communicating with, whether you're dealing with Egypt, Babylon, all the way to present day, where we're playing with our little alien friends, our little space brothers, which all have the same message. I mean, it's all the New Age stuff. I mean, whether you're dealing with the space aliens that are doing the automatic writing, right? They all have this message that we need to get rid of these old beliefs. That's i.e. Jesus Christ. Right? If we just do away with those, then we'll have a pure message. What writers like Blavatsky and others have called the pure Luciferian doctrine, right? That's what they want to come forth. Funny how the aliens would be interested in our religion here, or want a pure Luciferian doctrine to come forth. Those are some interesting aliens. And those aliens specifically hate Jesus Christ. And what's also funny is that you've got entire organizations that have done full studies with plethoras of evidence that just like demons, that aliens seem to find a way to cough you back into your bedroom real quick from wherever they've got you at. If you start choking out the word Jesus, you get it out of your lips, something shows up at your bed and you feel like you're in paralysis, or the thing is sitting on your chest, or you got the little goons. And this generally begins with shadow people experiences, and they'll become progressively more real. And in most all of these cases, of which I've talked to many people who've had these alien abduction experiences, and just appear right into reality, right in through the walls or right into the bedroom. And then the thing has you somewhere, and it's interested in genetics or playing games, or women that have had what they believe is a pregnancy, even test pregnant, and then without a miscarriage or abortion, later abduction occurs, and the fetus is somehow gone or removed or what have you. You got wealth of this. The thing that is playing games with you, the thing that with its eyes, it can mentally control, create these illusional realities around you. In fact, specifically, in instances trying to get the woman or the man to copulate, to get the fluids, the genetics that it's collecting, which begs the question: what is it building? But if you've got something deceptive that is providing you parts of something. I mean, my question would be, why? Why can't the space alien fly its spaceship across New Mexico? Why can't it manage to get its spaceship across Russia? And even further still, if you were to capture the alien, and I believe the accounts that you've got something that crashed, and you've got these bodies, and by the way, if you've got something that has built a physical body and it is plugged in to that body and running loose in it, then it's going to view that body as we would view a spacesuit. So the death of that body.
Yeah,
is really
I mean, when you look at some of the occult accounts, from the world of voodoo, they're talking about little dolls speaking, talking to the controller. And that seems to suggest that those entities, they can pretty much use anything and materialize or make a thing talk, walk, or do whatever they want to manifest themselves. One thing I think you said it very important. I just want to highlight this what you said before. And you said if you look through the looking glass, to the other side, to the other dimension, what you find is not necessarily the truth and it's not necessarily right. And I find the same thing as well when I talk to people with a New Age background. They've got a spiritual experience, and because it's spiritual, they believe that whatever they get is the truth, and it's not deception. Obviously, from my perspective, these guys are lied to, they're deceived to. They have experienced some spiritual reality, but ultimately it's going to lead them to death and destruction. And the messages they get from that is not very good anyway. When you look, this is really interesting, when you look at these guys' lives, and how the lives sort of move on after this experience, it seems to draw them away from God. It seems to draw them away from an understanding of God, and they go into some sort of pantheistic, strange world of understanding the universe, and ultimately, I mean, we know it's going to lead them to hell. So deception, big problem, I think, and for sure, no question about it.
But I would point out that if you've got an alien that you've captured alive, and it crashed its spaceship, and you take it into a little holding facility somewhere, is this the same alien that can control you with its mind and cause you to open every door before it? Is this the same space alien that can materialize and dematerialize at will in people's bedrooms? But yet here it is under your control, as if to give you the impression that you're larger and can live somehow. Here it is crashing its spaceship as if to indicate that it has that large of a weakness, whilst delivering messages to you that always go in a very specific direction. Yeah, I would highly question that. In fact, in the ancient world, when you're looking at Egypt, you find that the Egyptians, there, as I was pointing out before, the instructions for them to communicate with their gods were very precise, very, very precise. You find this in Samaria as well. The instructions for that were very, very precise and clinical. And the instructions today are just as precise as they were back then. You're not going to find the large governments, the same governments who are pumping out all sorts of stuff about evolution, and this is where all the grant funding goes, is things about, hey, man, here's some little monkey idols, and you guys used to come from monkeys, and the academic knees must bow to this religion of belief. And, if you breed enough monkeys, you eventually get people. By the way, that problem gets even worse when you start trying to look at what led to the monkeys. But on the other end of the fence, what are they spending bukus of dollars on? Whether you're looking at Russia or whether you're looking at the United States, probably other countries as well, they're investing in the paranormal, the supernatural. Oh, no, over here, none of that's real. And then over here, let's pump billions of dollars because it looks like it's very, very real. Oh, no, none of it's real. Billions of dollars. It looks like we've got something here. So these are your two different stories, and it's never been different than that. In Egypt, you've got your elite royal family that believes that they've got underworld, beyond the underworld, because they've made some kind of a deal with Osiris. That's the belief that every pharaoh is going to walk at his inception, is going to walk from the obelisk, right, which represents the phallus or the penis of Osiris, because according to the story, Isis Osiris was a god king. He was cut up into parts. Isis came in. She put Humpty Dumpty back together, but she couldn't find his male organ. Okay, one account it was eaten by an alligator, a crocodile, and another one, I think, a hippopotamus swallowed it. Whatever the case, she couldn't find it. So she made a very special phallus for him, the same phallus, the same special phallus that would produce this special offspring that we call Horus, the dimensional eye atop the pyramid that beckons from the back of all of your dollar bills. So a pharaoh would walk at his inception from that obelisk, the same obelisk as you have in Washington, the same one as you have at St. Peter's, the Vatican, right there in the middle of that big sundial for the sun worship, right? That's what it represents. It's there at the Vatican, where Rome is, the Catholic Church. And they would go into that ovum-shaped building, just like you have at St. Peter's. Identical replica, just like you have in Washington, D.C. So Pharaoh would walk from the phallus or the penis of Osiris into the very heart of that dome-shaped building, which represents the womb of Isis, the impregnation by the god Osiris. Because, see, you're making your deal with the devil, if you will. You are consummating yourself to the will of that underworld god over the empire of earth. In fact, that's what the drawing of the cartouche is. So you've got the pharaoh in the middle between two lines. You've got the underworld god on top, and you have the symbol of the empire below. So the god operating through the flesh of Pharaoh over the earth. That's the representation. That's the understanding that they had. And this would buy you, if you were really lucky, this would buy you, according to their system, this would buy you pass because you were so good to these mean, evil underworld gods. You're like a helper to them, right? As Pharaoh. And in return for that, they cost you some trinkets, an empire. Same thing that musicians say they do today.
Yeah.
To get famous, the same thing movie stars say that they do today to get famous, the same thing many others. Well, in political power, that we've all got to lay down and compromise to some kind of a thing from the other side, right? That's the deal. I'm going to give you some trinkets, and you're going to give me this. You're going to give honor to the dark things, right? So it will recognize, and this, by the way, is the reason why you find that the logos of your most successful corporations are going to have, they're going to go back to paganism. They're going to go back to Babylonian systems. They're going to go back to things that are hardcore occult, is because when you pay honor, when you've paid homage to that occult, then you're going to get a little bit of return, a little bit of fleshy return. So, are you asking? Are you?
Okay, we are stalling again with the transmission here. We have to possibly wait a little bit to get you back online. I'm just looking at the modem here, and it's not coming back. Is it coming back? No, it's not coming back. Are you back?
I'm back.
Okay.
I'm back.
I don't know whether it's Skype or it's a local connection here. Anyway, carry on.
Okay. So a lot of one of the things that the Egyptians, for example, in their texts, which were very precise, just like John D. and Edward Kelly were going around to the empires, and they were getting instruction. And the dark gods, or the entities that they told everyone at first they were angels, right? That's what Queen Elizabeth certainly wanted to pitch. These were her top intelligence officers. John D. right? And he's talking to it's angels, right? Because if you were talking to demons, then that would be, the Catholic Church would have a problem with that. But as long as these beings on the other side of the looking glass, if you will, were continuing to tell John D. and Edward Kelly, well, we're going to give you the Philosopher's Stone, man. We're going to show you how to turn rock into gold. Well, all the kings of earth were interested in this. Hey, man, they're talking to somebody on the other side, and they're going to tell us how to turn rocks into gold. Today they're telling us they're going to give us free energy, man. There's always a pitch. There's a hook. Yeah. They're going to give us something, right? The Egyptians, well, they're going to give us an empire, and on the other side, we're going to be in paradise. We're going to reign with Osiris. There's always a hook, man. There's always a hook, and it's always based on all of mankind's age-old hang-ups. Free energy. We're going to turn some rocks into gold. Well, I would argue that the Egyptian pharaohs didn't get eternal life, and I'm going to come to that in just a second, any more than, well, not in what they wanted. They've got eternal life, but not what they asked for. When you walk into Snake World and you look at those serpents and you got your Book of the Dead here with a bunch of spells you're supposed to read, I'm willing to guess that the serpents look at you and you're saying, but I was king. I did all of these things for the underworld. I did all of them. I did all of them. I'm supposed to read you serpents these scriptures. How hard do you think the snakes laugh at the Pharaoh? Well, looking at our documentation here, and King, I hate to tell you this, but according to the paperwork we've got, you've been paid in full. And you're not in charge in Snake World. So, I can tell you this, that that no more, when Edward Kelly and John D. and they continued to believe, and so did the kings of our earth. I mean, these things were literally talking to them through the glass. John D. in his diary, at first he's saying, well, I think they're really angels, but they got darker and darker over time, which is where it always leads. It always leads there. It starts innocent with some trinkets that sold you in. Hey, we sold you in, now we're mutually invested in each other, right? They never turned rocks into gold, but they sure did figure out how to do a bunch of progressively more twisted things for darkness. They certainly found their way there. And the kings of earth that began communicating with them, right? They found their way into all sorts of horrible things, which we won't go through in this video, but the product of John D. and Edward Kelly's going around to kings would lead to servants being bled to death, would lead to all sorts of twisted things, to speak to these wonderful entities who just wanted to help you make rocks into gold. I thought we were going to get rocks into gold. I thought we were going to get some free energy, man. I thought we were going to get eternal life and be in paradise because we did all of this twisted stuff that you asked. And yet there's no benefit for us in the end. What a surprise. This line hasn't stopped. And just as the cherry on top out there in Egypt, they thought they were wise. Just as we think we're wise today, right? They were out there building. Man, we thought we're wise as can be because we can communicate with these weird things on the other side of reality. Well, those weird things on the other side of reality were telling them how to make medicines, how to make all sorts of things that were supposed to be healthy. If you start reading through the medications that the Egyptians thought they were supposed to take, given to them by these same gods that were very precise on how to talk back and forth, right? Almost every medication that was prescribed to them by their gods is mixed with cow dung, human feces, urine. They venerated the dung beetle, which is something that crawls around on crap. And that's what. And I would argue that this is always Lucifer's mechanism. When he hands a glass of lemonade to you, your only question is how much of that is lemonade and how much of it is something else. And lemonade's not supposed to be warm. But in defense of that, you could be like many of the academics I hear and these other people. I mean, you can believe this whole gamut of nonsense while you're talking to your entities, doing your spiritual experience, whatever it is that you're doing. And in defense of that, as long as you hold your nose real tight, ignore the taste. It is warm going down the throat, isn't it? And nobody can take that away from you. But with Lucifer and with your little demonic characters, your space aliens, your space brothers, ascended masters, and the whole garden variety gamut of stuff that shows up at the doorstep and wants you to listen to it. From the spiritual dimensional end, all of it is that question, is that same question, and it's the same question entering through the minds of your politicians, the same thing that's entering through the minds of your science crowd, which is why they'll pitch you stuff like evolution. But no reasonable intellectual man is going to take a look at show me intellectuals through history that would have arrived at that as a conclusion. And the common theories are that order rises up from chaos. What man whose mind is not full of nonsense understands that if you lay that down as a foundation, which is the opposite of everything here, from the cells to the stars, and this is the basis of your theorems you're going to put forth, not only can you not call that science, here's a nice glass of warm lemonade, drink it down.
It's true.
The Egyptians were also told, that the pharaohs were also told by their gods to preserve their bodies because they understood. What their understanding was from these underworld gods was if you could preserve the body, man, if you could preserve the body, possibly somebody could bring you to life. And if you could be brought back to life, no matter how good it is in the underworld, it will never be as good as it was here. They seem to understand that real clearly. Right? You're entering into snake world. Right? And it'll be pretty good because you're with Osiris. It'll be better than it is for the common Joe because they're all getting tossed to the fangs of these evil things, right? But, I mean, they're getting weighed. The heart's on one side of the Egyptian scales and a feather's on the other. So you got your heart on one side, a big monster here waiting to eat you and throw you into the pit of the underworld, right? Which is a bunch of caves and cells where you're going to be tormented for eternity. And on the other side's a feather. So if that's not a test that you're designed to lose, I don't know what is. That sounds like a losing test. So, and that was their understanding. But what they're telling the Pharaoh, preserve the body, man, because if somebody could reanimate you or bring you back to life, then in theory, you'd be zipped out of the underworld. Now here's the funny part. They went to all these lengths to preserve every part of the body. But their gods actually told them to pull the brain out through the nose. Hey man, that's not the usable part. These intelligent gods on the other side. I mean, as if the whole thing was a big joke. And imagine Pharaoh when he enters into snake world. The one part that could actually make his theory true of preserving the body. The one part that you would have needed to pull you back out, if such were even possible. But as if to make a comical joke out of everything the Pharaoh has done. Hey man, pull your brain out. Here, man, drink the lemonade. Pull your brain out for us in the end. And that guarantees when you're in snake world, ain't nobody waking you up again. You are here for a long time. And I'll tell you, people that have when I've talked to people who have been, because I don't want to make light about hell at all. One of the things that's interesting about the Bible is you're reading that there's a different responsibility placed on the man out front of the temple than there is for the man sitting in the bush that doesn't know a thing. But if you enter into hell, right? If you enter into hell, and you were to take a look at it, we don't even know what eternity is. We assume eternity means just a lot of time. I don't think that's what it means. Here on earth, what those texts are telling you is that God will hear your prayers. He'll hear your prayers. He'll actually listen to you. The creator of the universe will actually listen to you and actually cares about what you think, what you say, and what you're asking for. That's what he says. In hell, people that I've known who have died on operating tables, one of the things that strikes me the most about their testimony of that place, you know what the people are doing down there? Even the hardcore atheists, the hardest atheist that there is praying as much as he can. He's screaming prayers forth from his lungs with one wish, that he had one human breath left, just one human breath left, that somebody would listen to, because they're all praying down there. But the thing is that there ain't nobody listening. And they aren't. And it will not change. They it is so serious. You're in a place, and with the pages, and what I would ask anybody to consider is that it is worthy of your attention. Look, you were born into a reality that you didn't create, you don't know much about. The first questions you would ask, even if you went going on a road trip somewhere: who am I? Where am I going? What happens next? These are the same questions you'd ask if you woke up in a ditch. These are the most worthy questions of a human being's entire life. And it is not just figuring out if there's a God. The demons know that God is real, and it benefits them nothing. In those pages, it's saying it is the fear of God that is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the holy. The word holy means to be set apart. That's what the Israelites, the Hebrews, the rebellious Hebrews, who always ran from God this way, that way, or the other. He kicked them out of their land a bunch of times and would bring them back. They were to be holy as God is holy, as the Christian is holy. And all of us, just like the Israelites, failed as a group. All of us fail at this on a day-to-day basis, which is why we needed to be covered or paid for. But they were set apart, just like God is set apart. The Christians are a peculiar people, but this is set apart, the knowledge of the holy. What is it that God wants? When you establish that there's someone larger than you, that's not a demon that's saying, hey man, if you sacrifice your kids to me, I'll do something good for you. See, that's not a friend. A friend doesn't ask you that. And the creator of the heavens and the earth, you can see his signature right inside the place. Like in a single cell, what you're seeing is that all the little parts of that cell are functioning to service each other. Both the big parts and the little bitty parts. They're all important. The cell would be absent without them. They're all in there to function, and they're all giving to each other. Now, if one part of that cell says, hey, I'm going to become big and fat, I'm not giving anything back. I'm going to collect from the other parts of the cell. Me, and I'm not going to feed anything through me. Because that part doesn't really understand the importance of the other part. It just decides, hey man, I'm going to do this. I'm bigger, I'm badder, I'm more important than the rest of you. Well, in a cell, we call that a cancer. And what do you do to a cancer? What's the only way? You've got to remove it and cast it aside. That's the only solution to the problem. And all of those pages of the Bible, all of them, are functionally the same thing. When you look at the commandments, they're all, just to make it easy, they're all good for you. Don't lie. Don't cheat with your neighbor's wife. Don't go kill your neighbor. These are all basic, simple rules that go hand in hand with the place. And following suit with that, if you're looking at the text in Leviticus, these books of the law, these rules that you're finding, even right down to the sacrifice of the red heifer, and you take the red heifer's ashes, and you mix these become these ashes, right? This is light. This is part of the cleansing process. Even the cow used for the sacrifice is playing a role. Discover until this modern age that we're in, that the cleansing coming right from that cow, the lye that's produced, and you would mix this, I think, with hyssop and other ingredients that today are that are scientifically very well established, and that's what those were for. Or the practice of circumcision was done on the 8th day. I'm pretty doubtful that Abraham had much medical experience. This was a time frame that was given to him by God, that you do it on the 8th day. Well, if you do it on the 7th or you do it on the 9th day, you're going to have medical problems that are a result of it. The 8th day is the perfect. Abraham says it was God that told him that. Going with you could go through literally every single thing in those instructions and find that they have scientific reasons behind them of why they were told to do it this way. And then you're finding within those texts other precision things that, number one, are models of the entire temple. The entire temple complex is a model of the coming Jesus Christ, beginning right there at the altar of sacrifice. And one of the reasons God would get mad, God was said when he entered the temple, wasn't just that they were buying and selling in the temple. I mean, that's abominable. Hey, man, we've turned the temple into a flea market. But it's more than that. The sacrifice that the people were bringing was something that they had raised. It was the best of what they had raised. Okay, the best of what they had raised to put on that altar. Enter in through that gate. You didn't say a name. None of that. You put a sacrifice on the altar. But more than that, it was something that was important to you, not something that you bought for a couple of bucks at the door on the way in. This was something that would have been precious to you, just as Jesus Christ was. And the doorway inside required this offering. What I'm telling you is that all of these pages, you don't find this in the main text. What you find is the master Hilarion, the costume artist, the guy behind the little UFOs, the guy behind the underworld demons. That everybody thinks, well, maybe I could do a deal with the demons and it'll come out okay for me. Maybe I could cut a deal. Look, there are no deals between devils and men. That's a cardinal rule. You violate that when you're already lost. I mean, that's a basic fundamental. There are no deals between devils and men. So don't be surprised when your glass of lemonade has more than lemonade in it. And somebody on the other side of reality laughing about this to death. The only thing is that you will pay the ultimate price for that. And I come back to the fact that Satan, Lucifer, he loves answering prayers. He loves it. But every good gift is from above. There is no good gift from below. And every gift from below comes price that is larger than any of us can pay. That's a fact. That's a fact. So here we stand in this modern age, as it says, so as in the days of Noah. That has two parts. Time period before the flood, in which you're reading, whether it be Enoch or whether it be Genesis or whatever. They're mixing things, jacking before the flood. That's what they're doing. They're trying to get the animals mixed together, man. They're trying to mix the genetics up, man, to produce new stuff, man. Because that's what we need to do, man. We don't know why we need to do it, but that's what we need to do. We need to take what God made and we need to make something weird out of it. Because that makes a lot of sense, right? Figure out how to make your own creator mad. There's a good plan. That's what they were trying to do. And Noah went forth, according to the book of Jasher. Noah was preaching to them. God said to them, if you change your ways, go tell them, Noah, if they change their ways, I will withhold this judgment. It's not like they didn't know the flood was coming. He went and told them this redundantly. Then in the book of Jasher, it says that when the floods came, Noah's on his boat. Many of them ran up there to the boat. And they're standing there saying, let us in. Let us in. Just like the virgins in the parable that Jesus told. There are 10 virgins. We'll get to that in a second. But they're standing there at the boat. They're standing, let us in, let us in. And the rains are beating on them harder and harder. And you've got all of these animals, which Noah had to scrutinize which ones get on the boat in a very special way. So you get hordes of animals around this ship. And the waters are beating down harder and harder. And then they start screaming, let us in, let us in. And Noah cries out to them, where were your screams? Where were your cries? 100 years ago, when I was telling you, I came to you, and I said God would do exactly this. And you saved your screams for the day that the flood waters began. And now you stand here. I don't think it works like that. That's what he told them. Those are his words, not mine. I don't think it works like this. And when they heard that, they tried to rush inward at the ship. And the animals burst outward at that moment and kicked them all back. And the waters were so intense at this moment. And it says that a burst of water came through and lifted the boat that Noah had made. And it lifted it in such a violent, catastrophic way that it says every creature within the boat cried out in his own tongue. They were screaming. And Noah himself was gripping onto the boat. And he said, and it says in the text that he got down on his knees and he cried to God and he said, please remember me. And it says at that moment the boat found its way to the top of the waters. And they were calmed. And there was peace upon that boat. So as in the days of Noah, so will it be, as in the day of the coming of the Son of Man. The day when they were mixing stuff together because it was cute and it was fun and it was whatever. It was, we don't even know where the ideas came from, man. We're just doing it to do it. It's cool, man. Well, according to those texts, there's a certain order to things. And we can do business with demons. That'll have a price. Or we can do business with God. And that will have a reward. That's what the text, that's the bottom line of the entirety of the text. And to understand the text, any of the ancient texts, requires understanding some bit of the symbolism from the ancient world. And what you're looking at when you're looking at Jesus, for example, when Jesus stood right amongst us, when you're looking at Jesus, let's take even from the cross, what you're saying, Jesus was declared innocent. He was declared innocent by all of the parties that would ultimately convict him 7 times. 7 different tongues would speak that he was innocent. And that includes even the Pharisees. They were later back in their hall, I think, that we did indeed crucify the king. Those are their words. Judas, when he threw he went and he threw the 30 shekels back, which was prophesied exactly what the amount would be for Jesus' head, the betrayer. So 7 times, and 7 is always the number of completion. You find you couldn't count up the number of 7s in Revelation. In chapter 2 and 3 of Revelation, lay out your history before the tribulation. They list out all of your coming churches. You couldn't count the number of 7. So 7 is the number of completion. So 7 mouths, all of his accusers, the secular and religious world, right? And that's important. Both condemned him to death. Now, Pilate attempted to do, because Pilate, his wife was having dreams that this is a bad plan, crucifying this Jesus. I don't know what it is about him, but it's a bad. So, and Pilate was conflicted about this. He was trying not to do the conviction of Jesus. He was trying not to. So, what he thought he would do is, well, I'll beat Jesus real bad. We'll beat him real bad. And what I'll do is I'll bring him out in front of the people, and they'll see him all bloody. And then they'll feel bad, and they'll think we've done enough. Because I really can't find any Roman law that he's broken. So that's what he did. So he brought Jesus out, and just to make matters more intense, what I'll do is I'll bring out the largest bad guy in the cage. A guy that's committed rapes and murders and revelries and rebellions and has caused all sorts of problems. The worst guy I've got among the Hebrews. I'm going to pull the biggest sinner in the cage up out of the pit and present him next to Jesus, who I find no fault in. And I'm going to stand these two side by side on the stage. So the last action before Jesus takes up his cross is he is going to literally stand. He's going to take the stead of the most guilty man in the cage, who is going to go free. The most guilty guy in the whole cage is going to go free. This guy who's 7 mouths, all of his accusers, has said, I can't find fault with him, is going to take his place and walk with his cross. He's going to be crucified. So now when we get to the cross, you're starting to see the symbolism here. Now as we get to the cross, Jesus is going to be put on this cross. He's going to be put on the cross. And on either side of him are thieves. Doesn't say anything more than just thieves. The generic kind of thief. Not even worthy of more mention than that. One is equal as the other. Now, both of thieves at first, and this is important. Both of them are mocking with the crowd. If you're really the Savior, pull yourself off of this cross. But one of them is doing it stronger than the other. The other changes his mind. The one on the left, right, changes. The one on the left is the one that was going strong on pull yourself off of it and joining in the mockery. Right? Goats on the left, sheep on the right, weakness on the left, power on the right. The one on the right changes his heart. His hands are tied down. He will not move his hands again until he breathes his last. There is no work he can do that will save him. No work. It's finished. And he has been a sinner to that point, a point to which his hands are now bound. But he looks over, and he doesn't even say it strongly. He doesn't even say it strongly because he's timid. Doesn't even say it strong. He says, if you be who they say you are, would you remember me in your kingdom? Jesus looked over and replied. He didn't say, I'll think about it. Maybe there's a chance. He looked at him and he began with, assuredly. This is a statement of fact. Assuredly, today you will be with me in paradise. That's the thief on the cross. And we're all thieves on that cross. Goats on the left, sheep on the right. And what was just demonstrated right there on that cross is how easy it was and how little it required. Not to whom much is given, much is required. So this isn't just some words that you can say and forget about later. And say the name of Jesus or some Lord's Prayer and it's all loosey-goosey and okay there. This requires a desire. God is judging the heart, just like he did that man on the cross. And that's why it's saying that the salvation must be worked out with fear and trembling. And as you enter into that, you'll find that things that had bound you before begin to fall off like nothing, and you don't even notice them. That you begin a true ascendancy into something more powerful than you can imagine. The other path is riddled with exactly the snares and traps and footholds and disasters and pain. These are the two paths. The other one is leading to what's described to you by Paul as the fruits of the Spirit. Love, joy, peace, patience. Speaking of Egypt, even the word happiness, happy, which is like a peripheral thing. Oh, I'm happy. And I don't mean to beat up on the word happy. It's fine to use. But happiness is a peripheral flesh thing. The word happy comes from the Egyptian god Happy. Every plague that came upon Egypt is in accordance with one of their gods that they put their trust and their faith in. It was their own gods who came against them by the living God. This was how it was demonstrated to them. Your gods are meaningless, and they're worthless, and in the end they're powerless, and will be the very things that are used against you. When Jesus was in the boat, he was on the boat, and the wind and the waves were beating the boat. Jesus was asleep in the bottom of the boat. And the disciples, they thought, oh my gosh, we're going to die. Now catch the symbolism in this. Now, it starts with that it wasn't until trouble arose that they thought about talking to Jesus, which is what is symbolism in and of itself. But nonetheless, they go to the bottom of the boat. And they shake him up. He said, what's wrong? Oh, we're dying. We're going to die. Jesus, O ye of little faith. Jesus goes up to the bow of the boat. Now, winds, in your ancient text, that you have the ruler, the prince of the air. That's even who Enlil is in the Sumerian. You got Enki and Enlil, the incubus and the succubus, the Baphomet, the the male and female counterparts of Lucifer, because he plays both ends of the stick. He swings that way, right? That's what the Baphomet is, with its breasts and its male. That's the ruler of the air. That's what's represented by winds, or the doctrines of men, which is synonymous with the doctrines of devils. The winds and the waves. Now, what do the waves always represent? What do the waters represent? Waters in the text can represent bodies of people, nations. It can represent the abyss, the abuso, hell. Now, when Jesus walked on the bow of the boat, the wind, he rebukes. But the waves and the waters, he simply states, be still. He owned the wind and the waters. Those are already his. He owned the waters. Those are already his. The wind represents what it represents. And both things were knocking on the boat. And Jesus is commonly depicted as walking on the waters. So what is he walking above? He's walking above the nations of men. He's walking above the abyss, the abuso, and taking strolls on the waters. This is often what he did. When the crowds would come to follow, they were always wanting to follow Jesus. And the disciples, when Peter's on the boat, he tried to take a step out onto the boat, and it pulled him in. And Jesus took him by the hand. He was getting swallowed into the water. Jesus took him by the hand and pulled him up. And even Peter was the one who Jesus said, upon this rock I build my church. Peter was that one. Peter was the one that would get out of the boat. The other guys wouldn't even get out of the boat. Peter was that guy. Yet when Jesus was going to go to the cross, which is a really hard thing to hear. If you're one of the disciples, they were sitting around having conversations about who was going to be king. It's going to be me. It's going to be me. And here Jesus with this. I'm gonna die. And Peter looked at Jesus and says, "Oh no, Lord. Oh no, Lord." And Jesus turned around and said, "Get behind me, Satan." Every one of us acts in the flesh, even Peter in that example. And your little alien shippy guys that are doing their little games, there's a machinery behind the world of men. That's what the biblical pages are telling you. That you're in a subset of something larger than you or Michael or me or anyone one of us can understand, but we can see the effects of it. You're living in a dimensional reality. And this is, by the way, why after Jesus' death and resurrection, he's walking in through walls. That's more than three-dimensional. That's more than three-dimensional. And the little spooky, demon-y little things that can appear in the skies and do these other little tricks, or little guys that appear at the front of the bed, well, these things are dimensional too. And you've got one side who is straight about its words. That's the reason why the Bible is called the truth. Why Jesus is called, I am the truth, the way, and the life. No man cometh before the Father except by me. So those words are either validated by the text and what we see in reality, which from my view they are so abundantly that it makes me shiver when I look at them. Or we can believe the other side that's got glasses full of lemonade that are full of you know what. Hey, it's warm down. Whether you're looking at Egypt, or you're looking at Samaria, or you're looking at even the Greeks and their belief in the gods and the Titans and these other things, which, by the way, Alexander the Great, his mother, she was into serpent worship. And whether it was a clever ploy that she spread later, I'm not sure what it was, but it was commonly said that Alexander didn't look like his father, Philip. the one-eyed, the king of Macedonia. But Alexander the Great took some victories that are absolutely unheard of. When he took Persia, he had a taste for blood like no other man. He had conquered at least 90% of the known world before he died, just as prophesied in Daniel, that he would live and then die, and then the empire would be split under his four generals. Told look at others. Alexander the Great's mother said that he was the product of sexual intercourse with the serpent, or in some other accounts, Zeus. Zeus, of course, represents Lucifer as well. With the Zeus is Satan, but she primarily said that he was birthed from her intercourse, or she was seduced by the serpent and produced Alexander. There'll never be another Alexander. That's what she said. I beg to differ with her. I think that there have been lots of Alexanders. Texts are littered with this idea, and that's how it came to be after the flood, is that mankind is seduced with the occult, just as Alexander's mother was, and thus beckon in, just as she did, the serpents. The serpent man, the same depictions that you see when you're looking at Saturn and Olympia, where you've got the part serpent, the part man, the coming forth from the underworld with the phoenix of Lucifer, the rising from chaos, the phoenix, the crow, the falcon, the raven, the bird that didn't return to the boat that was released by Noah. All of the symbolisms are important because they're not just literal, like Jesus literally walking on the water, but every action, particularly in the case of Jesus, is representing something larger in scope. But you have to read it to understand it. And this also applies when you're dealing with heavy, hardcore, no-nonsense portions of the text, like what you see in the book of Revelation. That it has a temporal scope, it has a larger scale spiritual scope, and then it has a scope that encompasses different levels of time. And there's no other book on earth that does this. That book, alien characters are not actually extraterrestrial, but the book you're holding, the Bible, it actually is. It is a book of supernatural origin that self-authenticates itself by delivering you information about the future from the past. This is specifically how God states as one of the ways he authenticates himself. I tell the end from the beginning. Text that does this. And I welcome and encourage and invite you to search out every word. You would be foolish to do any other thing, to take my word for it, Michael's word for it, or any other person's word for it, including the buffoonish science crowd or the academics who bumble this way and that. That you find yourself worthy to answer these questions, even and especially when they're not what you hear. Because that's what someone that is truly seeking does, is they look for the truth no matter what it is. And I have this strange feeling that when you begin to seek the truth, particularly if you're crying out and you say, Lord Jesus, please show me, that you're going to find that you don't have to search. That what you're looking specifically tailored for you will begin to arrive right in your hand. These are my opinions. I'm Trey Smith. God bless every last one of you.
Thank you for listening to Seismic Radio. I hope you did enjoy the talk. You can get in touch with us at the following email addresses. The first one is at Seismic Radio. That's info@seismicradio.org. And the next one is just go to the website at godinanutshell.com. You can also find Trey on Facebook. So it's Trey Smith. Just look for him on Facebook. And on the website godinanutshell.com, you've got opportunities to leave a message for him as well if you wish to do so. Okay, God bless, and please don't forget to tune back in here to Seismic Radio for more interesting talks right on the edge. God bless and bye-bye from Michael here at Seismic Radio.